Hi everyone, welcome back to Brookdale Farm. Well, we're running a little bit behind this year, but we've finally got everything ready and we're about to start seeding the oats. I just thought I would stop for a minute and talk about how we calibrate the seeder. So this is our seeder. We've got a Chamberlain Countryman 6 at the front, hooked to a John Shearer Mark II air seeder cart, hooked to a John Deere seeder bar. Now this is actually a chisel plough that's been modified to be a seeder. Now they're pretty easy to change over. All you got to do is change the point setup with the seeding boot on the back here, and run the air lines for the uprights, and I've got press wheels on the back here. Now every crop is seeded at a different rate, and the seed changes as well. So on the back here we've got a gearbox, and to take this one out of gear, I've taken the fertilizer out already. We turn this and just pull this out, and that allows us to change these here, and this changes the rate that the fertilizer and seed is put out. So I'm just going to run through now how we check the rate that we're putting out with this, and we'll check and make sure that it's at the right rate. If we come up into the box here and we have a look right down here, there's a little roller here with little teeth on it. Now as this rotates, it pulls seed down into the chute with the air running through it, and it gets blown out down the back to where the points are. If we change the speed at which this turns, it changes the amount of seed that is put out. Other than the gearbox here, most seeders have a secondary adjustment for large and small seed. So on this particular machine, we've got these two levers down here that slide in and out. If we were say doing canola, which is a really fine seed, and lupins, which is a really large seed. I've never needed to adjust these on this machine. The gearbox has plenty of range on it for the wheat and field peas that I do. And when I'm checking the calibrations, I like to just put half a bag or so in the seeder. That means that the rollers on this side aren't covered. We're not wasting seed going out through all of them. Now our crop plan tells us that we want to put our oats out at 90 kilos a hectare. To check this, we've taken, these are the pipes here that run back to the distributor heads on the seeder unit. We've disconnected one of them. We're going to put a bag on here and catch the oats that come out of here and weigh them. Now I normally do this over a measured 20-meter distance. Now how do we know how much we should be getting out of each of our tubes? There's a little bit of boring maths involved for this. So before we can work out our rate of how many oats are coming out that tube, we need to know a couple of things. We need to know the width from that tine to that tine up there. Now we are on 165 millimeter spacings here between tines. So we need that distance to that distance, plus 165 millimeters. So that gives us one space extra, because every time we come around the paddock, we're moving across that much further. We're not coming back right on top of our last seeder, our last tine mark. The other thing we need to know is how many points we've got, or how many spots the seed is going into the ground. On this machine we've got 16 tines on it. and it's 3.6 meters wide. Okay, now for the maths part. We're planting oats at 90 kilos a hectare. We've got 4 main pipes that are coming out the back of the seeder. So we want to divide the 90 kilos by 4, which gives us 22 kilos a hectare, 22.5 kilos a hectare, for out of each one of those pipes that we've got. Now on this particular machine, we know it's 3.6 meters wide. A hectare is 10,000 square meters. So we can work out how far we are traveling to get a hectare, to cover 1 hectare with this. On this machine, it is 2.77 kilometers to cover 1 hectare. So if I'm doing 100 hectares with this, I'm traveling 277 kilometers in the tractor. So we can now divide, we've got our 22.5 kilos, 22.5 kilos, and we want to divide that by 2,777 meters actually for a hectare on this. Now I know that we've only got quarter of the total output here, and we're still using the full hectare distance, but that's because we are only measuring quarter of the total output. So 22.5 kilos divided by 2,777 meters gives us a really small number, which equals 0.0081 kilograms a meter, which is a really unuseful number. So if we multiply that by 1,000, that gives us grams. So that gives us 8.102 grams a meter. That's a more usable amount. Now I normally check the calibration over 20 meters. So we then want to multiply this by 20. And so our target that we're looking for out of that tube is 162 grams. Now, it's all a little bit complicated, and it always takes me a while to work through all of this maths too, to make sure I've got it right. So we're going to go and measure that now and see what we're getting out of the seeder. Now before I do the calibration test on this, I always like to start the blower motor and just wind it over on this handle here until I get seed coming out that pipe there. That just means that the seed in the system has worked its way through and is through all the feed rollers. If you don't have a handle to wind it through by hand, just pull your tractor forward a couple of meters before you start doing your measurements. You'd be surprised at how much of a difference it makes, just the 2 meters or so before it actually starts putting your seed out. I've got one of these measuring wheels now for measuring out my 20 meters. It just makes it a bit more accurate, but it's fine to just pace this distance as well. I always leave the measuring wheel standing up in the paddock to show where I need to drive to. If you're pacing it, take a flower pot or a bright coloured ice cream container and just drop that in the paddock as your mark. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is just tie an old wheat bag onto this pipe so that we're catching everything that comes out of here. Don't use a plastic bag. You want something that breathes a little bit. to let the air flow through. If you use a plastic rubbish bag or something, the blower motor won't be able to blow the seed through to you here. And it all just gets caught up in the bottom of the seeder. So we tie that on. Okay, next we want to make sure that the seeder is in gear, and that's just a matter of turning the monitor on and pushing the engage switch on here. If you don't have, if you can't turn it on and off like this, usually there's a bolt you can take out or something like that to allow you to hold it in gear. Now we're going to start the blower motor, which is this petrol motor here, and drive forward the 20 metres. Okay, so here's our bag on the back, and I can feel a bit of grain in there. So we're going to untie that now, and we'll go and weigh the grain out. For weighing the grain, I just use an old set of kitchen scales with an ice cream container on it. And we have got spot on 165 grams, which is what we were aiming for. Now, all of the seeder books come with a seed chart in them for grain and fertiliser. But by the time the seeders get to this age, they're pretty hopelessly inaccurate, I've always found. So it's a good idea. I always check every year what I'm doing, check my calibration every year. What it is useful for is, this is for oats, kilos a hectare. If we were, say, getting 40 kilos a hectare, or the amount for 40 kilos a hectare, and the gearbox setting was on A5, we would, if we wanted to go a bit higher, the next gearbox setting is not A6, but it is B5, and then C4, D3. So the gearboxes don't always go up in a sort of sensible direction. So the seed charts are useful for that. They give you a good starting point for where to go. And then I've got a cheat sheet that I did up a few years ago with all the information on it and what I had each setting on last year. And you can see it changes. Last year I had the oats D4. Year before I had it on C5. It changes a bit with grain size and all of that sort of thing as well. So it is a good idea to check this every time before you start. Now, the way we have just checked the calibration on the air seeder will work on any seeder. But it's a little bit different if you're trying to calibrate one of these old seed drills, because they've got, I think this one's a 24 run, so you've got to divide your numbers by 24 instead of just by 4. Different row spacings and all of that sort of stuff. So the maths is a bit different, but the basic principle is the same. Take one of these hoses off, put a bag under it, drive for 20 meters, and then this one here has got a gearbox on it, in and out of gear here, and your different settings for seed and fertilizer here. Some of the older ones have got cogs, and you've got to change the cogs. This one here has got a very faded seed chart on it up here, and that helps you with your gearbox settings and things like that. This one's actually more accurate. This seed chart's actually more accurate than the one on the air seeder, which is interesting, considering this seeder's substantially older. The other thing to note on these older seeders is these come out of gear when you lift them, unlike the air seeder. So you either have to do it with all your points down in the ground, or I used to just undo this bolt here. This linkage here is connected to a clutch further back behind the gearbox, so that when you lift, it pulls the gearbox out of gear. If you take this bolt out, you can lift it up and calibrate it without digging up your ground. Anyway, I hope you found this little video useful, and that it's helped somebody calibrate this, or at least check the calibration on their seeder to make sure it's correct. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope to see you again next time. Thanks, bye.